This is Jerry Barrett talking. Today's date is March 17th, 1986. I'm interviewing Al Gibson in Miami, Florida, in the Airport Hilton. Al, if you would you begin by talking a little bit about the relationship between Eastern Airlines and the pilots, who are you're primarily involved with, over the last couple of years, but going back before '83 even.
Okay, well, first of all, the pilots have, I became involved in negotiations, although I've been around the company for, as I indicated to you, over 20 years. I had some split service. I left the company during six-month period in the IAM strike in '66, but discounting that, I've been with the company since 1964. The pilot group, let me go back here, as I indicated to you, I've been involved with negotiations since 1972. And the pilot group is, they've been what I would consider a pretty moderate group on the property. If you want to call it militancy or conservatism, being conservative from whatever perspective you want to call it from, actually began in 1983. For several years, beginning in 1975, we took, after we had signed an agreement, the pilots took a wage freeze, followed by those wage restorations in 1976. In 1977, we had the variable earnings program, and that program stayed in effect through and including as we got into 1982, the 81 agreement, it renewed, and the pilots, as we got into 1983, the pilots took a wage freeze in 1982, and then were due to get a pay increase in 1983 as a result of the 81 agreement. They got 3% in 1981, a wage freeze in '82, and then were supposed to get almost 14% increases in 1983. And about that time, we started having problems that we've been negotiating with the IAM. Their agreement had been amendable, I guess, at the end of 1981. I could be wrong on that date, but we've been negotiating for a long period of time. Finally, as we got into late '82, we saw the economic conditions did not allow for Eastern to pay the pilots that 9.5% and 4.5% increase that I spoke to you about, that was in the that we came about in 1981. And we went to the pilots in late 1982 and continued into early 1983, where in February of '83, the pilots agreed to not take those increases that were due in February 1983 and take them beginning over in 1984, I think in January and March of 1984. The reason for that, one, we couldn't afford it. Number two, we were having a very difficult time with the International Association of Machinists. And with those pay increases sitting there in 1983, we felt it would be very difficult to negotiate a wage freeze with the IAM, or very minor increase, if we in fact gave the pilots that 14%. But
okay,
bear in mind, the pilots had taken a wage freeze in '82. We got the pilots to agree in February of 1983 to wait, as I indicated, until 1984. They were in the ratification process of that vote when, lo and behold, I think it was March 13th of '83, the IAM settled with the company, and they were made aware of what the IAM settlement was, which was rather, that agreement was, it really wasn't, excuse me, let me go back, that was not a settlement. It came to the 12th hour and midnight hour, and Charlie Bryan said he would take it out to the membership. That agreement failed ratification, but the pilots saw that agreement. It was a back-end loaded agreement, but it called for several increases, of which the last one was a very high increase. the pilots got quite perturbed over that, and the tentative IM deal that Brian did not agree to, which he put out for the vote, failed. They then renegotiated again and wound up with a increase in back to January of '83 of something like 21.2%, effective January 1, '83, with further increase in July of '83 and subsequent increases in '84. Well, you can understand, here were the pilots that have taken a wage freeze, and then with subsequent increases, their deal never passed muster. The IM agreement ratified, and we had a very terrible situation because we had an agreement that we knew we couldn't afford. Colonel Borman admitted we couldn't afford, but at the time he couldn't take a strike because he only had like 11 or 12 days of cash. So what we did at that point, we then went back to the pilots, explained to the pilots what had gone on. The pilots then agreed not to take that increase until 1985, I believe. I don't have my books with me. Not till 1985, but they deferred it. But for the deferral period in 1983, they would get, excuse me, that was only through '84. The deferral period in 1983, they would get debentures for the monies they did not receive. They would get a debenture for each $1,000 of wage give up, the difference between what they should have been paid and what they actually were paid. And the variable earnings program, which we had, that was dovetailed into it, and where pilots before were only receiving 96.5% of their salary on the old 100% salary, now with this increase up to 114%. I think I initially told you that they would do to get a 9.5 and a 4.5, roughly 14% increase. So they actually had 17.5% of their money being counted towards these debentures. And at the end of 1983, they were going to get paid the difference in these debentures. They were 5% subordinated debentures. The pilots did agree to that. They were concerned that if they didn't go along with it, the company would go bankrupt, and which I believe it would have, as well as the fact the IM, they took their VEP and converted it to called an investment bonus agreement, where they continued to give up their 3.5%, but it became a loan rather than a payoff in the event the company made money. Previously, the VEP said if we make over 2%, you get a portion of that back. Okay. This was converted to strictly a loan. Along around September of '83, things were really going bad. The summer really wasn't that good. The bottom line wasn't that good, and September was a real disaster. Colonel Borman, we had a series of meetings, and Colonel Borman decided that we needed to get at least 15% wages, possibly more, plus productivity from each of the groups in order to survive in 1984. Went to the groups initially. In the meantime, the TWU is now negotiating. They have an overdue agreement, and they're in the process of attempting to negotiate. Nothing is going on there. Now, when they saw what the IM had gotten earlier in the spring, it was very difficult to tell them they can't have a pay increase. We then, in September, late September, I guess Borman said, if we don't get things squared away by X date in October, then I'm going to have to file bankruptcy. I have no other choice. Well, this created a big turmoil. The unions didn't want to be faced with a deadline. We had a TWU agreement that was open, and they weren't going to agree to anything until after they had a contract. I guess it was just about at that point that Bill arrived on the scene, and shortly thereafter, well, he he got the groups to say they would sit down, we'd have independent analysis come in, financial analysts come in, excuse me. We had Lazar Ferrer and Company come in, and also Locker Abrek. In the meantime, we were able to get the TWU settled. Of course, they got a big increase too. They got something like a 16% retroactive back to April of 1983. With the parties sitting down, we worked on the problem. We had to work with the banks, and really it was into January of '84 that we finally concluded and got the '84 program into effect. And basically what that did was to take everybody down 18%. The pilots were down 19.73% because a lot of their wages are tied to benefits, and where the IAM is not tied to benefits. So that's where we were. We got into '84. '84 was pretty well squared away. I don't know if you want me to stop at this point, if you have some more questions, or you just want me to keep going.
Go ahead.
Okay. We got into 1984. '84 went along, and there was a commitment by the groups. It wasn't in the pilot agreement, but there was a commitment by the other groups that we would sit down. Our objective was at least to get 2 years out of this. Charlie Bryan did not want to go more than 1 year. So the groups committed, hey, we'll come to the fall of next year and we'll sit down and take a look and do what needs to be done. And we got into late 1984. Obviously, it grated the pilots that the IAM, not only had they not gotten their increases, even though it was off their higher pay, the 18% was off of the higher increases that they would do, the 20% down. They felt they had not gotten any increases since, or money in their pocket. True, they didn't take a 20% hit because they got increases up and pulled them back down. But in the case of Charlie Bryan, he had gotten new money. Remember, they're still working from 1983 wages. Mm-hmm. In other words, this money was due in '83. They hadn't gotten it, even though they, for the purposes of taking their pay down, they were restored back and then took 19.73 hit off of that. The Charlie Bryan in 1983 had gotten his 21.2 and he'd gotten a 3, and then in 1984 he was due 2 increases. He got those 2 increases. They were figuring in his salary, and then they took the 18% came off of that. So in effect, what the pilots are saying, since I was due that money in 1983, I took a 20% hit from that figure. Mm-hmm. Charlie Bryan, since 1983, he got 32% in his agreement because he'd gotten a 21.2 and then another increase and then 2 increases in '84, which compounded out to 32, and even with an 18% hit, the pilots felt they were 14%. Okay, what occurred during all this time is that animosities started between the union groups, and the company really was in the middle. They were being whipsawed. You do something for one group, the other group would beat you to death. So as we got into late 1984, the makeup after the we had gotten through this thing, and it was approved in early '84 with this wage give up. There was still a lot of animosities, and the pilots became more and more determined that they were only going to give up an equal share. Mm-hmm. As the situation developed, the MEC, which is a union controlling body, became more and more militant. They felt they had, in their estimation, had gotten the shaft, that they were on the low end of the totem pole, that they were paying for the gains Charlie Bryan had gotten. Now, I don't agree with that. When you have to look at the marketplace of different groups. But anyhow, they felt that way, and that was a perception, and when you perceive something, you have to deal with those facts. Mm-hmm. We got into late 1984 and we went to talk to the pilots. Well, the pilots would have nothing to do with us. In the meantime, as we got into, let me get through 84 here. Give me a second to think. We did 84, and we came around to do 1985, excuse me. Late 84 to do 85. Charlie Bryan's agreement was amendable on December 31st, 1984. And they were concerned where Charlie was coming from. And Charlie Bryan insisted that his agreement was amendable December 31, 84. That's why he didn't want to go more than the 1 year. He then insisted, Colonel Borman came out and said, we can't afford to restore the wages in 85. I'm not going to restore them. Bryan says, under the terms of my contract, you've got to restore them. And there was a big clash.
Okay.
Went public, Charlie went to court. Everybody was going to court to get their money back. Finally, and Bill, once he had resolved the situation in 84, had stayed close to the scene and was trying to get things going in the fall of 84. Anyhow, what finally resulted was the company agreed to restore wages in January 85 for 1 month only. And then with respect to the IM, they would go back to the 18%. And the same with the flight attendants. The pilots wouldn't agree to anything, but they said, we'll sit and negotiate with you. We've reached an agreement with the pilots in January of 85. And a lot of this was based on what we would call as a mediator's recommendation. Bill had put out a multi-point plan to get the people, to get them off the dime. And one of his recommendations was pay everybody 100% in January. Then he suggested a 5% increase from the 18% down, 5% in effective February 185 and 6% in 1986. And then thereafter, you know, we just have to wait and see. We reached January 31. We were going to go into default 1985 with the banks. January 31st, we were in this very hotel negotiating. We had all three groups here. I felt we were very close with the pilots. The flight attendants were not that close. Charlie obviously wasn't, and anyhow, nothing occurred that night. We went into default. As time went on, we did meet with the pilots, and I think on the morning of February 7th or 8th of 85, we reached agreement with the pilots. 24 hours later, we reached agreement with the TWU on the 85 wage investment program. Charlie came in a little bit later. Remember now, Charlie had an open agreement because his agreement had expired December 31, 1984. Oh, yeah. So he's trying to negotiate a long-term agreement. And he negotiated this agreement. Basically, it gave them their 5% and their 6%. Okay?
Which the other unions had gotten, or were getting?
We're going to get, right.
Okay.
The pilots was framed a little bit differently if we didn't reach an agreement. But the flight attendants, they got the 5 to 6 and the additional 7 if we could afford it. With the pilots, we did, because the pilots agreement was going to be amendable on June 1, 1985. So what we did with the Charlie got a 5% in 85, a 6% in 86, and then a 4% 1187 and a 3% 7187. And also he had the ability, that would get him to 100%. Also, if he performed productivity, if he gave additional productivity other than had already been accounted for, he would get credit for that productivity and would get paid one time, up to a maximum of 13%. So in effect, he could go to 113%. All that came to pass except when we had an agreement with the pilots that said if the flight attendants, both the flight attendants and the IM have to ratify the agreement to make the pilot deal good. Shortly before, and this was negotiations after we thought we had this put together, on March 29th, 1985, the pilots told us we had a ratified deal, ratified by the membership. In fact, just about a year ago, not quite. Shortly thereafter, we recognized the deal that was put together by the TWU, which basically parroted the pilot deal, wasn't going to fly. The flight attendants would rather give up money than change their working conditions, where the pilots would rather work a little bit harder but not lose as much money.
Okay.
So he had two groups parroting themselves, but with different philosophies. Well, when it got to their executive board, the TWU executive board, it failed like 9-1. When it went to the membership, it failed. Recognizing that was going to happen, I went back to the pilots and said, let's take the TWU out. You people are only concerned with the IAM, and it's tied to the IAM. Well, the IAM vote then, a few days later, in April, fails. But there was some concern over the vote itself, the legitimacy of the vote. I'm not privy or aware of all the details. But basically, the IAM re-voted the agreement, made some minor changes, but substantively the same agreement, and it passed in May. The pilots then turned around and said, we don't have a deal. IAM failed. We said, hey, it was substantively the same agreement. We tried to negotiate to make the pilot deal good as a settlement rather than going to court. That didn't work, and we wound up in federal court all summer and into the fall, where we finally settled a court suit, and we made some changes to the agreement. They got some money back, and in the fall of 1985, we signed the agreement on October 13th, 13th or 14th, whatever the Monday was. I think it's the 14th of 1985. We also have been trying to negotiate a letter of agreement to fly our DC-10s. We were supposed to start service in July, and the pilots held that agreement hostage until we settled a court suit. They wouldn't let the DC-10 deal get approved, so it made it very difficult for us. However, we were able to, our concern was losing the route, and we flew it with supervisors 3 days a week to keep the route. Which then brought us, we signed that on October 14th. I thought I'd have a breather for at least a month or so, because we had to, remember the pilot agreement now expired on June 1, 1985, and I still had a basic agreement to go through. This was kind of like a bridge agreement. So nothing, that calmed down. In November, we brought the pilots in as well as the other groups to show the business plan for 1986, which was disastrous. We told basically what we thought we would need. We showed them the magnitude of the problem and basically what we thought we'd need to do. Well, naturally, everybody threw up their arms. Here comes the annual crisis again. Yeah. Do you want me to stop?
No.
Okay. Here comes the annual crisis again. This thing is perpetuated. Charlie Bryan came out and I think even said that we had deliberately pulled down the block hours to pull down the revenue to create a crisis, which obviously was not true. Our problem was that we just didn't have enough pilots and couldn't do everything, and we had been hit with some sickness was on the increase. We've been hit with some retirements, not that much, but anyhow having problems. We then, on December 5th, I presented the ALPA Negotiating Committee with our proposal, which called for a big increase in utilization over what they had seen, utilization around, in the high 50s, 56, 57 hours, somewhere in there, and a 20% cut in wages and changes in the medical and dental insurance programs. Well, obviously, this didn't sit well with them. They had normally exchange openers at the same time. However, for some reason, they weren't ready to exchange openers. We received their opener on December 13th, which called for an increase in wages of about 17% over an 18-month period of time. After seeing this and recognizing the need to do something and the seriousness of the problem, we were faced with, over 200 and, I think the initial business plan quote $268 million loss. We had to do something. And we immediately applied for mediation. The pilots immediately turned around and geared into a program such as that went on at United, where they were prepared for strike contingencies, awareness, whipping the people up, getting, really creating a frenzy. They really had a very effective communication program, I might add.
Use closed circuit television and other things like that?
Oh yeah, they used satellite systems in 9 cities. They had 2. We called the first one. We nicknamed the first one Saturday Night Live because it was on a Saturday night, and they called it their teleconference, and they did a very effective job. But understand, through this process and seeing what was going on with namely the IM and how they felt they were being screwed, to be honest with you, compared to the other groups, and with the changeover of the members to the MEC, which is their Master Executive Council, which are made up of members from each local, make up the Master Executive. The groups, depending how you look at it, became more militant.
Okay.
So
they'd gone through an election.
They'd gone through, yeah, they go through staggered election process, so they don't elect the whole body at one time. It's like the Senate. They do 1/3 every 2 years. Well, these guys do probably, they have 9 councils, so they probably do three or I don't know how they do it. It's a 2-year term, so they have to take 9 councils over 2 years, probably 5 one year, 4 the next year, and they stagger them. And then not only they stagger them each year, but they stagger them during periods of the year, so to give you some sense of continuity. But anyhow, the group had gotten, by all of this period of time, pretty militant, won from the court case because they felt that Eastern was not living by the terms and their agreement should be null and void. We didn't think so. So you had that problem. We flew supervisors in the DC-10. They had fits over that. They felt the airplane shouldn't be in the air. Now, faced with this third item, and remember, since the 8/1/83, if you want to call it their book rate, they did not receive any increase. And here they saw. And then when we renegotiated or got our settlement in September, Charlie Bryan, realizing his pay for productivity deal, and the company and the union were constantly haggling, what's that worth? No, that's not productivity, that's nonsense. So what they did, they renegotiated their wage agreement that took out, they had gotten productivity but so high, but basically turned around, instead of being able to get up to 113%, they negotiated but gave planned programmed increases, only got to 108%. They wound up with a lower end rate, but time weighted over the period of the agreement, it might have come out to the same. I didn't do the analysis myself, but I've heard people tell me that. So anyhow, you had that situation. Now you have a unique situation where back earlier, the pilots wouldn't do anything till Charlie did anything. Now we're trying to get the pilots to do something. They won't do anything. They're saying, what's Charlie Bryan doing? Charlie says, I got a closed agreement. My agreement's not amendable. Yours is. You do something. So it became a catch-22 again. So here we were negotiating with the pilots. We had a mediator show up on the property on the 13th of January. although they had granted our request for mediation in December, the chairman of the NMB held off at the request of Alpha not to send somebody right away. We had two diverse proposals, they wanting increases, and then they started modifying, and we didn't come off our initial proposal because even with their modifications wasn't doing the trick. I mean, nowhere, not even anywhere in the ballpark. In fact, we were on different planets. Finally, around January 23rd or so, we started from the pilot negotiations. Things started to move a little bit, and we met in Washington the week of January 24th, 25th, and 26th. We'd been up there all week, but Colonel Borman had come up for something else and was there, as well as our chief financial officer, chief legal officer. And we earnestly tried, and I believe the other side did too, tried to reach an agreement that weekend, but they didn't stretch far enough, and I believe they felt they, at that point, had exceeded their authority. And as far as we were concerned, the company, they really went backwards in their last proposal because they got maybe cold feet of where they were. Mm-hmm. Nothing happened again until we started meeting again, and we met a following week or so in Washington on 2 weeks, and nothing really occurred. Actually, things really started going downhill. Things started getting very, very dicey. Our cash position was going down rather rapidly because during this period of time, the TWU 30-day clock, our 30-day clock was started. I should go back and say our 30-day clock began on the 26th of January, so at 0001 of the 26th of February, pilots were free to strike, we were free to impose. Now, the flight attendants' clock had started back in December. When they got to their strike deadline, apparently, from what we can understand, they reached an agreement with the pilots that they wouldn't go out then.
Oh.
They would hang in there, and then they both would have, the flight attendants would have the pilots leverage when the pilots' clock went. But in no case, they were going to go out on March 1 because our covenant said if we didn't have agreements with the three major groups on March 1, we were in default. Well, the flight attendants didn't go out. We imposed work rules on them. There was a lot of yelling and screaming. Sick leave went through the roof. But people were getting, the public was getting scared of, you know, am I going to book on Easter? Am I going to get my seat back? There were talks of bankruptcy. So then it becomes, well, if I put the cash up, will I ever see the cash again? People had, obviously, visions of the Braniff situation and Northeastern situation, I'm sure Air Florida. Mm-hmm. So we saw our revenues deteriorating. We saw our cash coming down. And it got to the point the board of directors, the executive board was having calls at least twice a week. Maybe more. I mean, I'm not aware of everything, but I am aware they were having had a number of meetings here as well as telephone conference calls. The board had met several times, and then I guess the board had met that Friday on February 21st and authorized their investment bankers, because at that particular point in time, nothing was happening with the pilots. Not much was happening with the flight attendants because they had an open agreement too. So we had two open agreements. Brian wasn't saying anything. So the board authorized, and we were getting very close. The cash position was coming down where it might have gotten to a position based on our cash position that we might have had to file Chapter 11. So the board authorized at the Friday board meeting, I guess on the 21st, as I understand it, our investment bankers to go out and seek potential buyers. Well, when they put the feeler out, it didn't take very long when Mr. Lorenzo of Texas Air Corporation answered the phone. Mm-hmm. And I guess dealings started going on with him throughout the weekend. Well, the pilots had gotten wind, although we were not free to disclose who that was, who the prospective buyer was. And I want to go back a second, 21st, 22nd, back to around the 15th of February. Our Saturday afternoon beforehand, we had called the major unions in at a meeting and advised them all at that Saturday meeting we had to do something. We had a major problem. They had to come to the party, or else there wouldn't be a party to have. And there was no ultimatums, no threats, but the thing was we're either gonna do it, or we're either gonna fix it. We're gonna either fix it, we're gonna sell it, or the place is gonna go bankrupt. I mean, basically those three items. So going back, then we got into the weekend of February. This went on, and we met during the week, and started meeting that Thursday, February 20th, but nothing went on. We didn't even meet on Friday. Saturday, we met a little bit. Sunday, things started to heat up. They started to get real antsy. They had gotten wind who the prospective buyer was, although we were bound. We couldn't disclose the prospective buyer, otherwise the deal was down the tubes. He didn't want to be disclosed. We went through all day Sunday, a lot of discussion back and forth. We had, in the afternoon, a lot of dialogue. And finally that evening, we recognized, we had to get the pilots on board to get the flight attendants on. Well, we knew this for a while. We had to get the pilots on board first to get the flight attendants on board. And then hopefully we'd have time to work on the IAM in order to consummate this, because the IAM was going to sit still until the others. Mm-hmm. Well, we gave them a proposal, I guess, around 8:30 or so, maybe 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, Sunday night, and told the pilots, here's our proposal. We hope you can accept this proposal. If you can't accept this proposal, we hope you at least take it back to the Master Executive Council, who was in session at the Ramada Hotel down here in Miami. The caucus came back and said they had some problems. We said, look, if you have a few problems, we can massage this around. We still have to get the dollar savings, but if we can massage this around, we'd like to, we want a tentative agreement. Well, they came back after a caucus and said, we have too many items. We said, fine, take it to the MEC. The MEC went into session, probably, although I wasn't there in the beginning, was a very, very, a lot of tension, a lot of trauma. Everybody recognized what could possibly happen. Although the strike deadline was still a couple of days away, there was a new deadline because the purchaser had said, Eastern, you have until midnight Sunday night to make a decision. The board can vote it one way or the board can vote the other. Well, now you got the board members sitting out there with fiduciary responsibility. If they vote this thing no, and the prospective buyer goes away, and then you file bankruptcy and the prospective buyer comes back and gets it for less money, or somebody else comes in and gets it for less, the board is subject to personal lawsuits. So they had to be very careful what they did. Anyhow, we got a call approximately at 11:45. Actually, Bill Usry got the call from Randy Babbitt saying that the pilots were in the process of voting. He thought it would go, and asked if two of us could come over and sign it because they wanted to make sure we got it signed. So Bob Shipner, my boss, is the Vice President of Flight Operations. I'm the Vice President of Pilot Relations and Administration. We went over there and we signed the agreement at 11:58 on the night of the 23rd. Now, the pilots were in the process of voting this, and on the first, it passed on they have a one-man, one-vote rule, so it passed like 19-8 or something. But then somebody can ask for a roll call vote where you vote the number of people that you're representing.
Okay.
Okay? You're not voting as a one individual. If you represent 200 co-pilots at your domicile, you have 200 votes. If I only represent 40, then I only have 40. Anyhow, it turns around, they have a roll call vote, it fails. Then they went in to move for consideration, and this went on and on and on for a few hours. And
You're in the meantime waiting over there?
we're waiting over there. My
Sign.
boss and I are waiting in a side room, and they're very, very concerned that we're going to leave. Because I have the pieces of paper that we've initialed off. It was an Eastern proposal that I just crossed through the word proposal and wrote agreement. Anyhow, it was in the middle of the night that that this finally got signed, and came very close to not even having an agreement. And so, in the meantime, in which you're talking with Roland Pizzaro or whatever, the flight attendants were in negotiations, and somehow they broke down in the middle of the night. They didn't get their agreement, and it was, some subsequent days later that the flight attendants finally reached an agreement. And both our agreements have 20% wage reductions in it, and productivity, not quite the productivity we wanted, but I think, and I can only speak for the pilot side of it, I think an acceptable level of productivity near where we needed to be. You never get 100% loaf. Acceptable, and changes in the dental plan and the medical insurance plans, and on the flight attendants, I know they got their 20% reduction, and the same changes in medical and dental and health, and also the vacation change that we were trying to provide for corporate wide. And as of this moment, the only group sitting out is the IAM. And with regard to the pilots, we're in the process of writing up or agreeing on all the final language. That normally takes a little bit of time, but we'll get that done.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the chronology. Now, you may have a bunch of questions, and I'll be glad to try and go back to that point in time.
Okay, all right. The study that was made in the fall of '83 by the consultants that you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
Did the unions really buy into that? From your point of view, did they?
I think my opinion is I think the unions knew we had a problem. They constantly use the word management credibility on this property, and I think bringing these two groups in, Locker Abrecht as well as Lazard Ferrer, gave them the feeling that if they turned around and said, you got X problem, they could sell it to their membership. I think it was almost more for the ability to be able to go back to the membership to say, hey, there's a problem, rather than saying a Frank Warman or a Wayne Yeoman or somebody in Eastern Management says it's a problem. It put believability into it.
Oh, okay.
And an independent analysis.
Where did the idea for that come from? Was that initiated by the unions?
I'm not so
kind
sure
of
if it was initiated by the unions or was it at Bill's suggestion that we get independent analysis brought in. I would have to think it's probably more Bill.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe Bill in concert talking with the unions.
Is it just a matter of the business being very complicated, that it's hard to communicate across the bargaining table or to a membership what the hell the problem is?
Well, the problem, if we were dealing with a manufacturing company, it'd be very easy. You blow the whistle, you stop all the machines, and you call everybody into the main part of the building, and you get up on a rostrum and you lay it out on the line. Here you're talking about an airline that has approximately 39,000 employees spread across 100 and something cities. Anytime you try and do anything, it's especially down here in the Miami area, it's in the paper. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult to keep anything on an internal in an internal environment. Everything becomes external, and obviously, since the regulation, it's a very labor-intensive, and really that's where your costs are. Fuel costs everybody the same. You can buy airplanes that cost everybody close to the same. Of course, some people argue Instead of buying 757s, we should have turned around and used 727s. You can argue two-man versus three-man crew. But, you know, the upstart carriers don't have retirement programs. They pay for their own medical insurance. They only get paid for the block hours, so they only get paid for what they actually do. Our pilots get paid for things they should be doing and don't because they misconnect and what have you. You take all these fringes and throw it in, it runs your costs sky high compared to the low-cost operator. So it's become very labor intensive, and obviously when labor becomes the focal point and the idea is to push somebody down, nobody wants to go backwards.
You deal, or in recent years anyway, you've dealt primarily with the pilots. As a group, aren't they, well, a friend of mine always jokes that when you see a pilot get off a plane, he's running to talk to a stockbroker, you know. In other words, they're relatively sophisticated about the financial affairs of the world. Have you found it in dealing with them that those ideas can get across to them fairly easy?
Yeah, but we have 4,000 pilots, and I'm sure we have 4,000 investment bankers who could tell you a better way to do it. Okay? And not having all the privy to all the information, it's very easy for them to make, like I said to you before, for instance, in 1984, we were buying 757s, and as part of the deal, we said, hey, we need to buy these. If you object to them, you can even go to the board of directors and express why we shouldn't buy them. We went to an MEC meeting out in San Diego, myself, the current treasurer of the corporation, and the vice president of financial planning at the time. And although I was just there as the liaison, I did none of the talking. The MEC was very adamant, and they were really upset at the fact that we were buying these 4 757 airplanes. We shouldn't be buying airplanes. We have debt.
Okay, we're back on. You were just talking about a meeting in San Diego.
Oh,
with the
yeah,
NBC.
a meeting in San Diego, and they were very adamant on the fact we shouldn't buy these airplanes, and took strong exception. Anyhow, they did not go to the board of directors. We went ahead and bought the airplanes. Now here we are in early '86, and things are really, you know, firing up. Forgetting our current problems, the economy's really moving. People are flying. You know, a lot of expansion. We're hiring a lot of pilots, and pilots saying, "Why don't you buy airplanes? Buy airplanes. Buy airplanes." Well, you know, it's not like the local Ford dealer where you can get down and pick up 50 cars off his lot. These are things you have to do. So what it is, it's the perspective at the time of what is going on. I think the Airline Pilots Association was just that until a few years ago. It was an association. You have a lot of independent thinkers. I think the ALPA as an institution has become more militant, and I don't mean that in a nasty way, okay? I mean they've become from just an association of pilots into a union because of what happened to them at Continental, okay?
Okay.
And then in the deregulated environment with the New York Airs of the world, with the People's Expresses of the world, that the companies have had to deal with this, and as I said, it's labor intensive, and pressure and basically take them from a regulated environment that said, a pilot came in and said, hey, we want these pay increases, and we said we can't afford that, and we finally agreed to X amount, and all of a sudden there's a 6% increase in the price of tickets, because although we didn't have tandem bargaining in the industry, you know, United was the last to sign. Eastern, the goal was to get X, you know, get $1 or $2 more than United. You get more than that. So everybody was, can you top the last agreement? Well, when you got into a deregulated environment and the cheap frills, cheapo fares came out, oh my God. Everybody in the beginning kind of laughed it off, but as they made inroads and the price of the tickets came down, well, the established carriers had a rough time. And then that put pressure on organized labor, and that put pressure, obviously, on the individual agreements. And you've had these what the pilots call concessions. Really, all it is adjusting to the marketplace. But, you know, I can understand from their perspective. They consider it concessions. They're going backwards. You know, they look at this picture. It's like if you've been getting 3% a year for the last 6 years in wages, you forecast that out to X amount. All of a sudden, the 3% up is going 5 or 6% down. And you say, whoa, you know, I'm worth more than that. And it's very difficult for them to accept.
It's a hard adjustment for anybody to
Oh, absolutely.
think in terms of less, yeah.
Sure.
Is a part of the pointing of the finger at management that they're not doing a good job, is that just another part of that?
Well, what's going on is that from an operating standpoint, we made a profit in 1985, you know, rather substantial profit. However, bottom line, it all almost went away. I think we made $6 million for the year. And the reason is our huge debt. We're servicing debt. We're paying $215 million a year in expense. But if you didn't have the debt, you wouldn't have the airplanes out there flying. Now we can argue, you know, should we have done it how we did it, or over the period that we've done it. We got some very favorable deals with regard to the A300 and being the lead purchaser in the 757. A lot of people argue you shouldn't have done it. You didn't need it. You said that was a fuel-efficient airplane, but at the time, everybody was forecasting fuel to go up, and here we got fuel at 75 cents a gallon and probably going down. But still, it's a good airplane. It's going to be around for a number of years. But people blaming management because if we didn't have that heavy debt, you wouldn't have to get in our pockets as much. Now, that might be true. I can't argue that point because the numbers speak for themselves. You don't have the debt, you don't have the interest, but you wouldn't have the revenue, and you wouldn't have half the employees you have. So, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Yeah. You got to have capital investment to make money. And, you know, if you only had half the pilots, then those that are captains might be second officers, and some captains would be first officers, and they'd be making less money because they wouldn't be in as high a position as they're in.
Yeah. It really almost depends on where you want to start arguing.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. And, you know, we were on the backside of the power curve in 1975. We almost went bankrupt. We had a very aged fleet, and we modernized the fleet. We first came in and we got a lot of 727-200s. Then in 1977, really by a stroke of genius, I guess, of some of the people that were here, the A300, the Airbus people, were trying to make inroads in the United States and couldn't get to first base. And they had some whitetails over there, and they actually leased us four A300s for $1 a month for 6 months. And the deal worked out so well, and we bought more and more airplanes. They've been a very good, very reliable airplane. And but still, when you have 34 of them now, and some are leases, but some are sales, it adds to the debt. So, and then compounded that with, you know, we kept getting 727s, I guess, until the early 80s, and then the 757, and the debt's mounted up. But somebody said the other day, with our airplanes, with 280 airplanes, if you turned over 20 a year, it would take 14 years. Do I have that right? Yeah. It'd take 20 years. How was that? We have 280 units, and if you did 14 a year, that's what it was. It'd take 20 years just to turn over the fleet without any growth. Well, we have airplanes flying around here, the 100, since early 1960s. And that doesn't account for any expansion. Now, you do get expansion because when you replace a 757, you get rid of an old 727. You have more seats, you can provide more lift, but still, people found out with the wide bodies, equipment. You're not going to swoop in 2 times a day and take a whole boatload of people from point A to point B. The consumer wants to go when they want to go, and as long as they have that option, they want to, time is more important to them. Time of day is more important to them than flying on your wide body, although on long flights, obviously, people want wide bodies. So.
The relationship with that Borman has with the pilots, having been a pilot himself, is that deteriorated given the fact of the business problems?
Yeah, Frank Borman, who I really admire and respect, I mean, to this very moment that I'm talking with you, because I believe without him, I wouldn't be talking with you today. I mean, the things that he's done for this company over the years and the time he's put in, you know, you think of a CEO who comes in, puts in, you know, X amount of hours per week. I mean, the man works relentlessly for this company. He lives and breathes Eastern Airlines. And his credibility was sky high with the pilots, and his downfall, credibility-wise, was in 1983 when he caved to the IAM rather than face the brink of going bankrupt because he'd run out of cash in 11 or 12 days. If he had it to do it all over again, who knows what decision he'd make. He might make the very same decision with the same facts. He might do the same thing. But that really hurt him because the problem was not he so much, but upper senior management had everybody so geared up and wound up that we're not going to be extorted. We're not going to cave to this stuff. We're going to go out. I mean, we were training people on the ramp. We were training people how to do all the jobs the IAM were doing. And people really geared up that they'd had enough of the IAM, the threats, the abuse, and everything else that went along with it, and then settle. Well, and then for the price that I indicated to you before the settlement, morale went from a fever pitch high to an all-time low. And up till this day, maybe not so much today, but up until the point we just got these last agreements in place, morale was still down. The employees were still not hurt so much with what happened with the IAM as that I think the impression was the company doesn't say what it means.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, you told us you were going to do that, and you weren't going to let this happen, and you did. Well, all of a sudden, Charlie got his, where's mine? Now, all of a sudden, instead of, hey, we need to turn around, and we need to cut our costs, and we all need to do it together, now it's, since he got his, give me mine. The hell with the sacrificing bit.
Okay.
All right, we all want a bite of the apple, and that's what happened, and that's a terrible situation to get into. Now, it's funny, this time around, everybody recognized what needed to be done. It was done. The IAM hasn't given in, hasn't given their fair share. I think there are IAM people that are embarrassed themselves because they see the other employees have had to give. And where nobody wants to give up 20%, I think they recognize that, you know, the seriousness of the problem. And Brian's sitting out there, and I think it's, well, as it was indicated in the paper, he was willing to give up 15% if Borman resigns. And this headhunting for a price, I mean, if the company would have done that, that would have been terrible as far as I'm concerned.
That was the thing, that was a last-minute offer that he made, actually, in the board.
The night of the 23rd, yeah.
Yeah. There was a time that, I've just lost the date now in my mind, when Bill Essery was not involved at all with the pilots because of an objection that Schulte had made to him. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think when. I guess it was after, in early, I'm trying to think now. We had the 83 group, the 84 group. I guess it was right after the 84, early 85, late 84, early 85. We put that to bed. I'm trying to think here a second. For some reason, they weren't very happy with Bill because they felt Bill. Oh, I'll tell you what it came out to Bill. They got very unhappy with Bill back in last May when Joe Leonard was appointed president. It was actually May 21st, and they kind of felt that they were very partial to a gentleman by the name of Mort Ehrlich, who's the senior vice president of planning, who's now with TWA. And the indications were that Frank Borman was going to name Mort Ehrlich president of Eastern. And instead, he didn't do that and named Joe Leonard executive vice president, and I think last September became the president of the company. They felt Bill had a lot to do with that and orchestrated the fact of knocking Mort out of the situation and getting Leonard put into it. And from that point on, Schulte really didn't want to have much to do with, with Bill Ussery. I think they give Bill more credit for that than he justly deserves, and I think it was obviously a number of people who were involved in that decision making, and I just don't see how they can turn around and say Bill Ussery made all those decisions. So the relationship, I think Bill's relationship with Alpha National has been pretty good, but obviously from a local level, from the Eastern contingent of the pilots, has not been that good in recent history.
Can you talk a little bit about the way the pilots work? I mean, the union itself. You alluded a little bit before to the way in which they vote on things. If it's a
well, you mean the what the framework is?
Yeah.
How it's
and how it affects you're dealing with them.
Well, the MEC is composed. The MEC is the Master Executive Council, which is the ruling body, and all the MECs of all the airlines make up board of directors of ALPA. Okay. Now they have what's known as an executive board that gets involved in policy-making decisions, and that's made up of each MEC chairman from each airline. The MECs operate. They work obviously on a budget, but they are not. Where other unions are more closely tied, like the flight attendants here, the TWU, and TWU holds the certification. So basically, if you want to say the international vice presidents hold a lot of power, down with the pilots, each MEC really controls the power. Alpha National is the administrative arm, and yes, you have big policy decisions where, say, Hank Duffy gets involved, but the MEC are they're really the ruling body. Mm-hmm. It's almost like an independent union, and as I say, you have the MEC chairman, the vice chairman, secretary, treasurer, which are the MEC officers. And then at each domicile where crews are based, and we have 9 of those, you have a captain rep, a first officer rep, and a second officer rep. So 3 times 9 is 27. There's a 27-member ruling body, and they're the ones that vote on everything. Now, my day-to-day dealings are normally with the MEC chairman, or he has committee members like the scheduling committee or the safety committee and what have you, and I deal with those people also. But primarily, I deal a lot with the MEC chairman with respect to what's going on, and then obviously during negotiations I'm dealing quite extensively with the ALPA negotiating committee and their negotiating chairman.
Are they the negotiating committee is elected specifically for negotiations?
Yes, sir.
They don't have other.
No, they're regular line pilots who are elected by the MEC, and they serve at the direction of the MEC.
Are they usually members of the MEC?
No,
Oh, they're
In
not.
fact, there's a policy that says you can't be a council representative and a negotiating committee member also, because you could turn around and vote whatever you came home with.
Okay.
So
So in
they
effect-
try and frown from that, although right now we have that occurring because somebody was just elected, but as a rule, that's you're one or the other. You can't be both.
So the negotiating committee works out the agreement.
Brings it back to the
Basi-
NBC for their approval. Once they approve it, then they take it to the membership, but because of this, what went on that fateful night of February 23rd, the NBC has the right to turn around and ratify it on the spot without membership approval. It's up to them whether they go the membership or not.
And that's the only reason they got an agreement.
Yes.
I mean, they would not have been able to if they had
No.
other rules.
If they would have gone the normal procedures, it might not have occurred.
Mhm.
So,
Over the past couple of years, the MEC chairman has changed.
yes.
Once or twice?
Well, their MEC chairman, it's a 2-year term. And the past MEC chairman was, well, let me go back. There was an MEC chairman, the MEC chairman prior to Larry Schulte was supposed to serve out a 2-year term, which would have expired in June of 1985. He only served 1 year of that term and was recalled. As I indicated to you, the previous to him was a MEC chairman. First it was, and I'm going back to 79 era, Augie Gorse, who had it from 79 to 81 and 81 to 83. Then George Smith was elected. He was supposed to have it 83 to 85. And as I indicated, after 83, with everything that went on, the MEC became more and more militant.
Right.
And what happened was, after several votes, George Smith beat out this other gentleman in early 85 for the MEC chairmanship after about 4 or 5 ballots. But it was like electing a Republican with a Congress radically changing Democratic, okay?
Oh, okay. Okay.
So he gets in office, he serves a year, he got into some, he and the MEC just weren't seeing eye to eye. He gets recalled. And they elected, Larry Schulte was the vice chairman at the time. He is a co-pilot. Normally you don't elect co-pilots to that job, but they had so many different people running for these positions. They wanted somebody who had some experience, or at least, you know, had workings of the union. So Larry Schulte was elected the MEC chairman. Now his term's up in June. He may or may not run again. That's up to him.
There's a lot more continuity with an organization like the Machinists because they have this one guy who stays there sort of year after year, Charlie.
Well,
Fry.
yeah, he runs every 4 years.
Mhm.
So his is a 4-year term. And I don't know what the TWU is, whether it's a 2 or 3-year term. I'm not familiar with their.
During this whole thing, there was a turnover there as well, though, wasn't there? with
Where?
the,
Oh,
with
yeah.
the flight attendants.
Yes, there was, and he got elected. He was the best of the lot, meaning he got more votes, but he didn't go in with any overwhelming mandate from his people. There were so many people running that he got the most votes, but he didn't walk in with a whole slew of votes. Prior to him was a lady by the name of Patricia Fink, and he was a past president back in 1977 or so, and he lost out. I don't know if he lost out. I'm not that familiar with him, but I've been told he lost out because he thought he was the shoo-in and really didn't work that hard at getting reelected, and woke up the morning after the election going, oh, I guess I lost. So, yeah, whoops. So, and then came back into power later on.
Mhm. This whole idea of snapback, you know,
Mhm.
that whatever concessions were made by the end of a certain period, they'd come back to
Mhm.
that point again. In the times when that was anticipated, when you were making the agreement that anticipated there'd be snapback, was that ever discussed that at the end of '84, at the end of '83, you're going back, you're going to be made whole again? Or was that just sort of an underlying assumption that never was made explicit enough?
Well, I don't think it was made that clear. And remember what I said to you, we went into this deal, although it was a one-year deal, we were going in with the assumption that the parties would meet in the fall of 1984 to discuss 1985, and if the situation warranted, we would continue the program or modify the program accordingly. The problem that you get into is that you change players in the midstream, like the negotiating committees changed on the pilot side, and it made it very difficult. We served a Section 6 notice, and I questioned whether our Section 6 notice could have held them at bay, but we wound up settling. They got their full pay for the month of January 1985, and as I alluded to you earlier, we settled there on in. I think one of our basic problems which made the situation more and more difficult, especially we got into this year, instead of taking, and I hate to use this word because I don't mean it in this sense, taking a hard line in 1983, or at least if you didn't do it after the first year, after the second time around, and saying, look, we got to do this, face reality, and Warren been saying this for years, the marketplace has changed, these are permanent fixes, let's do it and get it done with. We did a one-year deal, followed by a one-year deal, so here comes the annual crisis again, the annual Christmas crisis, and people, I think, just got tired of it. I mean, we would have been so much better off in the fall of 1983 to stick to our guns and do a permanent fix if it was all possible. Or if you didn't do it then, at least in the fall of '84. But you just can't do it annually. People were tired of hearing it. Mm-hmm. And each year it was the same story, change the numbers around, but we have this problem because we can forecast our expenses, and we're very good at that, but we can't forecast revenues. Who knows when somebody's going to drop $49 fares on you, or you're going to. In some cases, we took the lead to get at some of our people, our competitors. But you just can't forecast revenues that closely. You don't know what's going to happen.
Is a part of it too just optimism that maybe things a year from now will be better?
Well,
somehow?
Sure. The thing of it is, you want to give people something to look forward to. But let me reverse the situation on you. Here you're sitting over here at Delta, say, and you forecasted your revenues for the year, and you're going to say, I'm going to make X revenue, so you have a good plan in place, and Eastern's having these labor problems, and boy, in January and February, you're probably gleaning a little bit from that because people are going to shy away. They don't know if their return ticket's going to be good, so you're starting to book more. Eastern runs into the situation they did. The problem gets solved, but they don't have the future bookings they should have out there, right? Huh. So what do we turn around and do? Boy, we come out with an aggressive marketing program, cut the fares, come back and see us. We'll help you frequent flyer programs. You come back, you fly us so much, we'll give you this, we'll give you that, we'll give you the other thing. And all of a sudden, the telephones are ringing off the hook. We've had booking days. All right, what do your competitors have to do? They say, holy smokes. Even though we haven't had cancellations, it's obvious. When our plan loads and our actual loads, we start to get a hell of a difference. Obviously, the consumer's going to run for the buck. So now we had to cut fares to get all our customers back, and I think our marketing department's done a hell of a job. But you're sitting over there at Delta, and you forecasted to get X dollars in revenue, and you're going to have a shortfall. Not because you didn't plan right. Well, look what dear old Eastern did to you over there. Well, it works. I've isolated Delta and Eastern, but we have Piedmont come out with certain fares, and Continental came out with fares after they went bankrupt. I mean, hell, we were having a land office business in Houston when Continental went down. They came back as a bank in Chapter 11, came back with contracts, cut their labor costs, slashed at them, way down, and whammo, cut the fares, and they drove us out of the market. We couldn't compete with those kind of fares. And really, the only thing that Continental, the buildings didn't change. Same airplanes, the fuel prices. What happened? They drove the cost of labor down, and look what they did. They turned a dead loser into a dead winner. I mean, a live winner, I should say. Mm-hmm. It was labor. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and it's funny when I sit here and negotiate and people, you know, God damn it, you're always picking on labor. Friend, I took the same 20% hit too.
Yeah, well,
You know, it's not like
easy for
there was no escape. And it hurts me too, but I'd rather have 80%. And then from a personal standpoint, I won't use the word insecurity, because I never feel insecure. I think the fact I couldn't plan my life. I couldn't turn around. I was going to buy a new car. I finally bought one in May. I had to. My little putt-putt I was driving to work had over 100,000 miles, and it was becoming unreliable. But, you know, I've thought several times in the last 3-4 years to buy a new house. And I say, God, if I buy a new house and I get these mortgage payments and something happens to this company, I don't want to be saddled with these high mortgage payments. You begin to lead a different lifestyle. You're afraid to make any long-term commitments because you don't know what's going to happen out there.
Mm-hmm. Real uncertainty.
Real uncertainty. I'd rather make a little bit less, know the company's secure, and know my job's secure, you know, provided I perform. I'm not asking for a civil service job. But at least knowing that if I do my job, I have reasonable expectations that I can do, you know, most things I want, or at least I can plan on the long term and know they'll come to fruition. But the way things were going, I couldn't do anything. In fact, since I guess April of 1982, I pulled in my horns a long ways and really lived very conservatively, except for buying a new car that I bought last May. Very conservatively because of the fear that of what may happen. In April of '82, I was scared about the IAM situation, and then we went into these annual crises, and I knew these annual fixes they would handle that year, but you know, all I could see is when all this snaps back, as you call it, there's no way we can make it. And, you know, you save, I think in 1984, we came in with a savings of $260 million in cash and 70 in productivity. Where are you going to generate $300 million of revenue? I mean, you know, you're talking about a company generating $4 billion and in revenue. That's 8% of your revenue. Where are you going to generate 8% more revenue to pay your employees back? Just doesn't ring.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, it's amazing. We had this one-year program for the year 1984, and I can tell you there were a lot of people, I won't say droves, but a lot of people, they were counting on that money coming back January 1 of 1985. That the problem was just going to go away. I don't know what they were thinking about, but they actually thought it was going to go away.
More based on hope than any kind of analysis of that.
Yeah, well, one-year fix, and that's just going to wipe away all our problems.
Well, a part of that was the fact that there was a lot of media hype about that Eastern had gone into this new era of cooperation and so forth. I mean, I read it from a distance in Washington here, and was impressed that there had been, you know, people put on the board of directors, a lot of other employee involvement activity and stuff like that. So to some extent, it was believed, and part of that, I suppose, was for the public as well.
It was a public perception, although there was more cooperation. I noticed that we'd been through a very difficult IAM agreement in 1983. Let's face it, it was Frank Borman pitted against Charlie Bryan. Forget union management, Eastern, IAM. It was a Borman-Bryan battle, and you know, if you're keeping a scorecard, obviously Bryan won on that account. But it just made it very difficult. There were a lot of hard feelings, I'm sure. As I indicated to you, the employees were very psyched into, well, if the IM does strike, you know, we're prepared to go, and then the strike doesn't occur and they find out what they settle for. Very difficult to accept. I mean, really, people were left with a very empty feeling. I think the employees have gotten more involved, and maybe Had they not been involved so much, we would have had more of a difficult time in solving the 85 and the 86 problem, although the 86 problem was very difficult. But I think it probably helped because at least they had seen some of the books, and the believability was there, even though they might not want to recognize it, or go at it poor management and management's credibility. Management doesn't know what they're doing. That's it's a very perfect thing to do. In fact, on ALPA's satellite program, one of the things they were to caution the media people is don't get caught. Put the company on the defensive. In other words, send the media to let the company answer the questions. Don't you answer the questions. Okay. It was don't us be on the. Why don't you give up the money? Why don't you go to the company and ask them why they're running so poorly? They wouldn't need our money. In other words, force the company to answer, and we'll respond to the company's answer rather than us answer and let the company beat us over there. So they were very well orchestrated. The only problem was when they went in all this hype, I couldn't understand it because we weren't a United Airlines. We didn't have $3 billion in the bank. And really it came down to the point either we were going to reach an agreement or we were going to go bankrupt or we were going to Chapter 11. And I thought they spent a lot of money needlessly, but I guess they felt as though it was for a good cause.
The pilots have more of an attachment to the airline than the other two categories of employees. And taking in the non-organized employees.
Well, I think of the attachment, I think there's pilots feel very attached because they have a seniority list. Their seniority is only good for Eastern Airlines. They have a lot of years here. You take a senior captain who's making over $100,000 a year. If he loses his job here, he has no place to go. A mechanic can turn around and if he's a good mechanic, go somewhere else. He may not make as much, but his percent loss is not going to be the same as a pilot, because a pilot's gotten there not because of not only his piloting skills. I mean, he's got to be qualified and pass rigorous, proficiency checks and his medical standards, but his seniority got him to where it is.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and he can't go over to another airline and say, hey, I flew Captain 1011. We're hiring people right now off the street who've been captains on DC-8 that go to the bottom of our seniority list is second officer 727s. But a mechanic can go over to XYZ airline and be a mechanic. Now, as I say, he may take a 20%, maybe a 30% hit, but my God, if one of our captains got a job as a second officer at XYZ airline, he'd probably take an 80% hit. Mm. So there is an attachment. Plus, I think the pilots want to do a good job. They're professional. I think they're good at what they do. They're a pretty dedicated workforce. Mm-hmm. What we've been through has been pretty traumatic. I think there's a lot of people have a lot of bad feelings towards, quote, management, not towards Eastern Airlines, but towards management. And I think it's because of a lot of the rhetoric that has come out. Mm-hmm. But they're very concerned right now because of Mr. Lorenzo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what is this
with Texas Air Corporation, because they've seen what's happened at Continental, although Mr. Lorenzo has indicated he wants to see this company be viable and prosperous, and I don't think his goal is to tear this airline up or to strip it. I think this airline is probably 3 to 4 times bigger than Continental Airlines, and this isn't a little toy. And I think he's been looking for a big airline to use his other airlines as feeders, or at least synergy-wise to relate to the big giant. And he's gotten that opportunity, and I don't think he's going to squander it. Mm-hmm.
That personality thing between Borman and Bryan, is there any way that could have been headed off, or was that just the chemistry that was going to happen?
I don't know. You know, obviously, one like myself becomes more and more aware of it as it becomes public. And I don't know what had festered behind the scenes over a period of time. And I don't know where where it all started, and by the time it became public, if you could head it off. I think Bill Esri did a good job in September of '83 or early October when he arrived on the scene of trying to get the personalities out of it and trying to solve the problem. And I think he probably did them both a favor by calling in and getting involved with the financial people, what have you, and set the personalities aside and dealt with the matters themselves, and then try to keep it down. Because you've really, ever since that point in 1983, you've really never heard a Borman Bryant clash at all. They've kind of, I'm sure that things have gone on in the boardroom, but I'm not privy to that. But
you know, the role that Usry has played in this thing is unusual, and probably only possible under circumstances of some kind of a crisis. You know, ordinarily, however you define his role, I suppose if he still worked for the government, you'd probably call him a mediator. But since he works basically for management, but has this liaison thing, it's not easy to understand. Do you see any analogy in your experience to what he did, and maybe you can describe what he did?
I think what Bill brought, and I didn't know Bill Esri. I knew Bill Esri as well as I knew you when I walked in this door today, and I'd never seen you before.
Okay.
I had seen Bill Esri before, but I had never met him or anything else. And Bill and I have developed a very close personal relationship over these 3 years. I've probably learned more in 3 years than I have in a lifetime, because of just watching how he operates and how he says things, and how a lot of intangibles, but you know, it's not what you say, it's how you say it, and the context of how you say it, where you can get people to react one way rather than another way to you. I mean, he's done a masterful job. But I think what brought why Bill works so well, other than a mediator, because a mediator is just trying to facilitate and get the process done. Bill brought with him in his position, former Secretary of Labor, he understood the deregulation part of it, but because of his years of union background, had the sensitivity to the labor unions and knew what had to be said and what had to be done in order to convince them that management had a problem. And I think having that sensitivity and knowing how to deal with the unions the way he did, vis-a-vis just saying management saying we need, by bringing them around, by bringing in these outside consultants, by opening these doors up and these avenues up, probably did what a mediator wouldn't be able to do. Might not even have thought of. He spent hours upon hours, you know, seeing union people, seeing company people, trying, and he had a difficult time with management because he got management to do things that management on their own probably would never have done. And I don't mean from a mediated standpoint, but explaining why we should do this. And he never forced his way, but he had very strong opinion. Why we should do this, because it would be perceived over here, and you'll get a positive reaction type situation, where a mediator, probably a straight mediator, wouldn't have done that. He had the opportunity to talk to the senior management. He also had an opportunity to get in and to see how management operated, and could understand why the unions became frustrated at, say, certain individuals, and why management became very frustrated at certain individuals, or the way they acted. And I think having all that and knowing the sensitivity, he was able to weave his way through that process without stepping on toes of either side, and that's a very difficult line to walk. And there are a lot more other intangibles that are hard to describe, but I mean, and even describing, really, probably I've exhibited to you maybe 1/100th of the magnitude that he went through doing all this, trying to keep everybody on board, trying to explain, you know, getting the international people involved, the head of the ALPA, the head of the TWU, to explain to them the problems, that this wasn't just a management ploy to raid the unions or get in their pockets, or why we needed to do the things we did. So.
Just in trying to understand that role a little bit more, when you meet with the pilots in negotiation, are you the spokesman for management?
Yes.
Okay. Bill usually would not be in that setting, would he?
No, he was in 1980, early 80, I'm trying to think here, the 84 setting and the 85 setting. He didn't, in the 84 setting he set in at the end, and he really kind of tried to act as a mediator. The 83, early 84, the 84, 85, he was involved, but he didn't sit in the meeting. He sat in 1 or 2 meetings, but not that much. When we got involved down this last time, the weekend of the 24th, 25th, and 26th, he sat in the meetings, but he didn't say a word. Okay? So he wasn't trying, because we had a mediator there the last time, this past time.
Oh, yeah.
So he wasn't trying to take his role, but he was still trying to act as a catalyst between the parties, but not from a mediator standpoint.
Okay. So a lot of the work that he does then is away from the table.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, very
very
little at the table.
And is it your guess that in the other 2 sets of negotiations with the machinist and with the flight attendants, he basically played a similar role?
No, he, well, in the machinist in 1983, I mean, that was all settled after he got, I mean, that was settled before he even got on the scene.
Oh, okay.
He got involved, I think, at the end a little bit in the TWU in 83, and I'm not sure exactly how deep his role was at the end of that. Maybe he made a few suggestions. I don't know. I really don't know. In the other interim agreements since then, he's been involved, but not, as I say, not that much at the table. Now, he did this last time around. I know he got involved in the TWU agreement. He was right here in this hotel at the end. He was up late at night running back and forth. Not so much with the negotiators, I think, is dealing with the people in the international VPs and what have you, and the president of the TWU, trying to put things together from behind the scenes, trying to act as a catalyst. Really, that was really his role. He didn't want to get in the argumentative side of the thing. What he was trying to do is understand the problem, see how could we solve the problem.
The pilots hadn't used mediation before, as I understand it, until late 85 or 86. Why is that? And was that kind of a traumatic thing for them to use it?
Yeah, well, the last time they used mediation was back in 1971, and that was just prior to me getting involved. And in fact, when we were going through this and we applied for mediation, I didn't know what to expect because I had never been through a mediation process in my life.
Oh.
So, I mean, I've been to plenty of system boards where you have arbitrations, but I've never been through mediation. I didn't know what role a mediator was going to take or how you're supposed to act in front of a mediator, et cetera, et cetera. And we got assigned Mr. Bob Brown out of Washington, who is a real fine gentleman. And I met him, well, he showed up on the property on the 13th. I came on the 14th. In the middle of all this, my mother-in-law passed away. So it just seemed like when it rained.
Okay, we're back on. You were just talking about the use of mediation.
No, what I was saying is when my mother-in-law passed away, it was between sessions that we had met, and then the mediator was coming, so I missed the first day with the mediator there. But I showed up the second day, and anyhow, I got to meet the mediator, and mediator, I thought he did a fine job and handled the situation very well. He wasn't abusive. He was trying to get a deal. He was a hard-working citizen, and but ALPA, they were dead set of having a mediator on the property. They didn't want to be pushed or rushed into anything. They were adverse to having a third party sit in, and they felt we'd worked out our problems in the past. Why not keep doing it? We were faced with a problem. We were going to go into default and probable bankruptcy. In fact, if we hadn't have been faced, or this 30-day cooling off period hadn't have started, and there was no sense of urgency, or they would have been forced into a position, we might have gone down the tubes just for lack of action on anybody's part. I mean, it was a very very difficult time, and hopefully we're going to come out of this, and we'll be strong and maybe turn the tides around and show some profitability. I think we've gone a long way. I think the pilots, obviously the pilots are now working like a low-cost carrier, but of the major trunks, I think our costs are going to be damn competitive, and we'll just have to see how things happen in the future. But the mediation process, it wasn't, I guess maybe I built up more in my mind of what I thought might occur than what it was just like having an additional person there. After a while, it didn't even, wasn't even conscious of the fact or concerned with the fact that there might be a neutral party sitting in the room.
Okay. Well, it wasn't a matter that if you had proceeded, you'd lose control of the thing.
No.
You certainly didn't.
No. I think one thing that didn't hurt negotiations, but probably extended negotiations, ALPA put in, they had some outside legal counsel from a firm called Skadden and Arps. They had initially hired them as takeover lawyers. They were, maybe possibly take over the company themselves with other people. And then they also had they had a gentleman in there from a labor relations standpoint, I guess, to see if we were acting in bad faith or good faith to go after us. But anyhow, they had outside counsel, which turned around part of the time we had some outside counsel in. So what happened was, instead of having maybe 3 or 4 or 5 people on each side of the table trying to negotiate, at times we'd have 15 or 20 people in the room, and it became not that it wasn't unnerving to me, but it became a thing. You had to be careful what you say, and it became a theatrical performance more than a negotiating session, and I felt we just wasted a lot of time.
Really sort of a cumbersome procedure.
Yeah, it was. At times it really was.
Do you think it's made much difference having union members on the board of directors? And talk primarily in terms of the pilots. Has that made a difference there?
I don't know if it has or not. They have, well, the pilots and non-contract have 2 members on there. In reality, the pilots really have the deciding vote, because it's based on the amount of money that were put into the debentures, and the pilots put more in debentures than we did. So in fact, even though the non-contract has a vote on it, the pilots, in reality, since they have more in debentures, they have more voting power, so they can put 2 on that they want. I think maybe it gives them a little better insight and more perspective, that when they were going through this problem before, at least they had 2 board members that they could talk to, and knew from the board standpoint of what the hell was going on. How it sits at board meetings, or does it have a positive or negative influence at a board meeting? having not sat in the board meetings, only been there once or twice to a board meeting, it'd be very difficult for me to answer that question.
How were those board members chosen?
The nomination, and the IM could nominate one, TWU one, and they each nominated their local presidents. I would think the only thing that, and they'd obviously have to excuse themselves, anything involving policy with labor organizations, they'd have to leave the meeting. And at least Brian and Callahan, the two pilot members, see, they didn't elect pilots to the board, they elected two outside people, one Arthur Taylor, who's a former president of CBS, and Tommy Boggs, who is a lawyer but very influential lobbyist in Washington. So they kind of sat in on everything. So they had pretty good insight of what was going on and what we were trying to accomplish. So, you know, you hate to say it's like having a spy in at your at your briefing, but really I don't think it's, in a way it might have been good, because without it we might not have reached an agreement, or at least gave them better insight to give them more intelligence so they could reach an agreement.
That agreement that was reached, that you referred to it as a bridge agreement, that was reached in the well into 1985.
Yeah.
Did that make much sense?
Well,
I mean, other than getting the lawsuit finished, did the agreement itself make a lot of sense?
No. What had happened, we had this agreement we were working under, this document 103, which we had put together in February. Well, they were contesting it wasn't valid, they should have 100% pay. We were saying it is valid. Obviously, if they would have gotten 100% pay, we'd really been in trouble. And then they didn't want to be in a rush to negotiate the basic agreement. They wanted to have time to go through it. They hadn't had a chance to do any analysis, what they should ask for. And I didn't want to muddy up the water trying to do the whole thing either, because I think we would have come out with a product that would have been horrendous at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Although I wasn't expecting to be in as big a rush as we were with the new agreement, since we had the bridge agreement in place. But then what happened was the last quarter of 1985 just went sour. The traffic stopped, the prices came down, revenue went to hell, and Christ, we were in another crisis before we could say jackrabbit.
Yeah.
But I think we needed to get over the bridge agreement to get to the basic agreement. The short-term agreement made more sense in February because their agreement wasn't amendable until June 1. But by the time we got into this, then we argued about the validity, then we were in court. We knew we had to settle up on this past before we could go on with the future. And I think we created a lot of hard feelings, which didn't help going into the basic agreement over the bridge agreement and everything that went on in court. So, and the judge, it was obvious the judge wanted us to settle the thing. Hell, he kept us, we negotiated in the federal courthouse in Brooklyn till 5 o'clock one morning trying to settle our differences. But he
didn't want to render a decision.
Oh no, no way he wanted to render a decision. Yeah. And he'd drive us crazy. We'd go up there to meet, and by the time we get on the docket, it was 11:30. Then he'd go to lunch, and then he'd take a late lunch, 2.5, 3 hour lunch, and come back, hear about 20 minutes of testimony, and say, well, that's it for the day, fellas, see you around. And he was frustrating both of us, really was.
Yeah. He was trying to get the message across. He wanted you to settle, and
I
believe
so. I believe so.
The efforts at productivity by the various organizations, you referred at one point earlier to the machinist being a paper or on paper productivity improvements or something like that.
No. Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about that? How real was any of that?
Well, I guess There could be a lot of argument over that. The pilots felt that the productivity that the machinists were given was nonsense. They didn't feel they were given real-time productivity. I think there were some items, and I didn't get into it that deeply, but some items, I guess, if I was sitting in a pilot's position, I might have turned around and said, hey, that may not be quite there. But I think there were a lot of items that were good, like they started up another C check line or a D check line, I'm not sure which, and they didn't hire any more people. They actually moved people out of other positions to do that work. Mm-hmm. That's productivity. It's not as easily measurable because you can work a mechanic but 40 hours a week. And if you get 10 mechanics in this one shop and you can do it with 8, that's a 20% improvement in productivity. With the pilots, you wind up maybe working them a little bit harder. You lower some of we have what we call credit rigs, and you get paid for every 2 hours you're on duty, you get an hour's pay. Well, if you turn around and say, well, for every 2.5 hours you're on duty, you get an hour's pay. Obviously, we can keep them on duty more without an increase in costs, so theoretically you can get more work out of them. I'm just using that as an example. So it's very difficult. The pilots say, well, hell, a mechanic, as long as he's there 40 hours, you're going to pay him for that. Where do you gain the productivity? Well, obviously the gain is if you can do it with less people, and then instead of hiring people, mm-hmm. you use this mechanic for something. But it's very difficult for them to see that. Where with a pilot, it's very obvious. All you got to do is look at a bid sheet, and he's going to work more days per month, or he's going to work longer hours in a duty period, depending on what you change. A lot of people feel, there are a lot of people on the property right now that feel the machinists can work harder than how they're working presently. And we could either do with less machinists or we could accomplish a hell of a lot more work than the current workforce. And I think that's what's, with the pilots, that's probably alienated them somewhat. When they pull into a gate and the jetway is not available to immediately come up to the jetway, or you call for a mechanic and it takes time. Why? Why does this occur? Why can't they be unloading our bags the minute we shut off the engine, unloading the bags out of the belly? Why can't they push the jetway? Why do we have to wait 5 minutes for somebody to get here? These mm-hmm. are the type things that frustrate them.
And of course, if everybody's emphasizing the whole idea of service,
right.
then
and the
pilot might feel, I got here on time. Why aren't these people allowed to get off the
Well, it's like the pilot says, I'll break my neck and I'll rate and I'll get down here and I land and I get into the gate, and then it takes the ramp service guy for day and ever to unload the bags, and the people wait 45 minutes to get their bag. Well, all the good that I've done en route, they've destroyed in 45 minutes.
Right. Okay.
So you have that kind of perception. We bust our buns, and the flight attendants work very hard to make the passenger feel wanted and accommodate and do, mm-hmm. What's reasonable they can do to make their trip enjoyable, and then have it end like it does. It really, or when they're pulling out, they're still loading bags. Why can't they get the bags to the airplane on time? That type of thing. Yeah. And they're starting out making an apology for the delay that they feel shouldn't have occurred in the first place. So these are things, and it may not be the ramp man all the time. It could be a belt was late, or for mm-hmm. whatever reason. Yeah. But it's that perception. We're busting our tails to do everything we can for the passenger, so yeah, as I indicated to you earlier when we first started, there's some animosities between groups. Not so much. Pilots and flight attendants are pretty harmonious.
They are more yeah. so than the machinists are with the other two.
Yeah. Well, the machinists and flight attendants really don't interact that much. It's really more pilots and machinists. The maintenance of the airplane versus the flying of the airplane. There's more interaction between those two groups.
You made the point earlier that the priorities between the pilots and the flight attendants differed. The exchange of time off for more wages. Can you talk a little bit about that, particularly
Yeah.
in terms of productivity?
Okay, back in, as I indicated, early '85, we told, well, we reached agreement with the pilots to take X% pay cut, and they had to work more hours. And the flight attendant leadership, basically, when we reached an agreement, within 24 hours, they reached an agreement, and they parroted a lot of what we had done, okay, with that agreement. But the problem is, the flight attendants probably, and with the pilot agreement, we said, okay, you're going to get 86% of your pay for these 2 months, then you're going to go up to 90%, and then on and on and on. The flight attendants would have preferred, probably, and this is just my own personal opinion, weren't so much worried about the further wage restorations as don't change my working conditions. Flight attendants like time off. They like to take leaves of absences. In other words, there are a lot of flight attendants that are married, have children, and they'd rather make a little less money and have more time off. The pilots, obviously, all of them are the breadwinners, rather make the money, even if they have to work a little bit harder for it, rather than take a pay hit.
Okay.
So you have different philosophies, but yet you had two agreements come out along the same philosophical lines, and it just wouldn't work. And that's what I believe is why the flight attendant agreement went down.
That business with you want to let me put that. I was going to ask you about that arrangement with the DC-10.
Mm-hmm.
That came along at sort of a bad time. Let me see if I understand it right. The Eastern got permission to fly to Europe or London or something?
While we're in the middle of this process, in early April '85, we got authority to operate to London. And then we were also then gotten a harangue on whether, and while at this time we get it, like early April, on the 12th, the 13th, the 14th of April, the IAM deal fails to ratify. It ratified in May. We say, your agreement's valid because it's basically the same agreement. They contested that. In the meantime, we're trying to negotiate a DC-10 letter of agreement. They took the DC-10 letter of agreement as well as a renegotiated document that we had come up with in February, and it failed at the MEC in May. Meanwhile, they hold the DC-10 document hostage. They wouldn't consider it, and we sailed right through our July deadline to get started, and we flew it with supervisory crews, and they were just using it as a leverage point to get what they wanted in this document that they claimed was dead and we claimed was alive.
You had, Eastern had DC-10s before that, but just not flying?
No, we didn't have DC-10s.
Oh, that was...
We'd bought the 3 DC-10s from Federal Express, who had them on lease to Alitalia, and we got them from Alitalia. And we had trained crews to fly them, but we didn't use the line crews. So they basically sat on their tails for about 3 months, really all August, September, and halfway in October before we even used them.
If you were having a discussion with a pilot, somebody in an official capacity, like the chairman of the bargaining committee, member of the bargaining committee, and you're making the argument about that deregulation has changed things, and that therefore you have People's Airline and some of these others that are giving you fits as far as competition is concerned. And you basically make the arguments that their airplanes cost the same, their fuel costs the same, so the difference really comes down to labor costs. And as long as you guys only fly this number of hours and their pilots fly this number of hours, what do they say to that? I mean, how do they really respond to it?
Well, they say we're not operating the same kind of level of airline. We're not flying a no-frills airline that we're charging for sandwiches, charging the check bags. We're catering to a different clientele than the People's Express of the world. And we say, well, that may be true to some degree. You're correct in what you're saying, but still, when that passenger has a preference, or even our passengers has a preference, and the cost differential is such, after a while they're going to go over and try brand X rather than you, just because of the fare. I mean, when you take a family of four and go from point A to point B for $149 a fare, or go for $99, and the guy says, "Holy smokes, that's $200 round trip. One way times two is $400. Now we're talking some bread, and as long as they're safe, you know, what's wrong with that? I mean, it's a 2.5 hours, so I'll buy a sandwich, I'll pack a bag, I'll do something." Right. Used to be the argument, all you'll get is the hippies, the backpackers, and everything else, but let's face it, price talks. Mm-hmm. And we've proven that ourselves. You lower the price. Now, of course, you're going to run a much higher load factor, but the elasticities there, you'll pull people out of the woodwork at $89, $99 a fare, where at $149, you'll fall flat on your face. Yeah.
If it is someplace that they kind of want to go, but haven't made up their mind to do it.
Yeah. Now, you know, we just don't lower fares willy-nilly. I mean, we're out to make a profit. And certain markets, you have to be competitive. And if you're not, People's Express proved that a few years back. They'll just eat your lunch and keep eating, you know, just keep taking more and more of the market share. And when you fight back, and, you know, we have wide bodies, and people rather fly a wide body for 2.5 hours with a movie than they're going to fly a 727 or a 737 that People's flies. So you do have that ability, plus we offer food, People's doesn't. And I think that's where we, you know, and plus we can offer more flights per day, mm-hmm. more seats in the market. So I think we become a preference. But you're only a preference as long as your price is right.
When you look back at your career in labor relations, it's changed a lot.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I would let me just see if I can refer to a couple of things that occur to me that may have changed. One is, was there a time in the early part of your career when you didn't greatly have to be concerned about the competitiveness of the business? That is to say, the business side of the business. Your job was to make a deal with the union.
Yeah, to make a deal. The pressure wasn't there to make sure that your cost per block hour was at a specific level, because other carriers had raised, and you were really trying to just keep pace with the others in the industry. And you know, the cost has been passed on to the consumer. Now, starting in 1978, it really changed, because you had the pressures that you had to keep your costs to an absolute minimum, otherwise you were going to die out there. And really, I don't think anybody really, you had the Deregulation Act 78, but I don't think it really was until around 1980 that people really felt it, because even the upstarts really hadn't gotten that big by then. And boy, 1980 and 81, all hell broke loose. I mean, you had People's that was mounting up, Air Florida was building, and well, they just proved that you can. Air Florida proved how you can expand so rapidly that you expand yourself right out of business. Yeah. I mean, they did the same thing Braniff did. Hmm. And but it also proved that how carriers who had money in the bank could withstand the onslaught, and basically matched a lot of fares to keep the low-cost guy out. And it was the weak carriers like Eastern that were going to get nailed, because they couldn't afford to drop the fares because of their cost structure, but on the other hand, they couldn't afford to lose customers. So they're caught in a catch-22.
They really were in the middle. And that's primarily debt, is what the difference was?
Oh, yeah. Because these other outfits, they were getting all their money through equity offerings. And, you know, People's, when they first started out, I mean, all they were doing was selling equity, selling stock, and they couldn't sell enough stock. Now they have a problem because they've had to go to debt financing, and it's made it a little more binding. I think one of the greatest things that ever happened to us with respect to people, when people started going east-west on us and took on the Uniteds of the world and then went in the Northwest country, they spread out and they couldn't be as dominant on the East Coast, and I think that probably helped change some of our strategy when they were fighting on two different fronts. Let's take the plunge and let's go get them. And I think that was a smart maneuver.
It gave Eastern, in effect, some relief that they could compete.
Sure.
Was there a time, would you say that if you compare the first 10 years of your career with Eastern with the last 10, you just know a lot more about the business?
Now?
That you really didn't have to know before. You had to know labor relations, but you didn't have to know the business.
Well, I didn't start out, I didn't get involved in labor relations to '72, but Jerry, I'll tell you, because of the positions that I've been in, I know more in the last, since, excuse me, I probably know more since 1980 than I did since 1964, just because of the positions I've been in, and because I've been in more responsible positions, I've come to know more things in order to do more things. But, you know, obviously the pressures weren't there, although in 1975 we were close to disaster because we had an old fleet and we needed everybody's flying jets and you're flying Electras. I mean, that's just not going to wash. So from that standpoint, but it's obviously been a lot harder since deregulation, but I think and I've gone through some real traumatic periods and a lot of hard periods, but I think overall it's probably the job's been more satisfying. A lot harder.
Can you describe the labor relations function at Eastern? How's it sort of bureaucratically broken down?
Okay, the labor relations at Eastern really, you have the senior vice president of human resources, and who's got personnel planning under him as well as the labor relations side of it. Now, except for my job, and I report to the Vice President of Flight Operations, all the labor relations really fall under Jack Johnson. He has TWU and also the IAM side of it. The pilots, well, even the flight attendants, and they'd moved them in and then kept me out. Pilot contracts and flight attendant contracts are really not your normal industrial type contract because of the uniqueness of them. In my total period that I've been aware of, it's always been under the flight operations setup. I think it has, you know, centralization has merits, decentralization has merits. I know in my job, no matter who I reported to, if I wasn't over in flight operations, I'd miss the boat. I wouldn't have the day-to-day flavor of what was going on if I was sitting in the ivory tower over there. Because of a lot of things are safety related that have to do with the contract, and I'm not a pilot, I get a lot of input, you know, from management pilots on, you know, really how things ought to be that I might not otherwise get. But I report to Bob Shipner, who's the Vice President of Flight Operations, but I also have a dotted line relationship to Jack Johnson, who's the Senior Vice President of Human Resources. So, and during this whole time, I worked closely with Jack. I mean, he was aware of what was going on, and both he and Joe Leonard, the President. So we met on a daily basis, all the people involved in labor relations. We met daily, each morning, and kind of briefed each other what was going on, so we all stayed in tune with each other throughout the process. I thought it was very good.
In a sort of a non-crisis period, the day-to-day kind of things, grievance processing and so forth like that, are you directly involved with pilots? Or?
Yes. People who work for me sit on the system board as well as the lawyer who presents the cases. I basically try and solve problems if I can before we even get to a grievance type procedure. I'm also responsible, besides the labor relations activity, for the allocations and manpower as it relates to pilot availability and capability. So I have that added function to make sure we have enough pilots to fly the level of hours that we want to fly on a monthly period or a yearly period or whatever.
Does that include recruiting and training as well, or not?
Well, manpower and allocations, no, allocations meaning the hours we want to fly. We have a flight training department that trains the pilots, but we get involved. I don't get involved directly with the hiring, but we have people that actually hire pilots, and we go through a selection process. I'm not into that much. I mean, I have, I kind of oversee a lot of that, but I don't get into it because a lot of it's technical, and I'm not in the technical end of it. Vice President of Flying Operations really gets into that some more. But as far as our capability, how many people do we need to do the job, how we allocate the flying, the size of our domiciles, I get involved a lot in the manpower side of it. With things hopefully slowing down a little bit, I want to be able to get into more of some, for lack of a better word to say, think tank situations where, is there a better way to do business? Is there ways we can do things better that we don't need to ask the union for? Are there things we should be doing better? Are there different methodologies we can use? So that's what I'll be doing during the period that we're not in these crises that I've been going through for the last 3 years, but I really haven't had an opportunity to sit down. I mean, last year I had a week's vacation. So
no time to look at the big picture then when you're
no time to analyze. Everything's has really been more reactionary. So anyhow, I want to have the ability to sit down and try and analyze how can we do. Should the department be organized differently? Should I organize manpower or allocations differently so we can put out a better product? Is there at least, and I just haven't had that opportunity. So this will give me an opportunity to think, and then what do we want to do in the future with regard to the pilots? True, this agreement goes until 1988, mid-88, but I don't want to start a month before what I want to do in mid-88. And then, obviously, if when this acquisition or merger goes through, and I have every reason to believe it will, what is the philosophy of Mr. Lorenzo? What does he want? What does he expect? What does he want to do? And based on that, we may have to change things in the agreement to make that go along with what the corporate strategy is vis-a-vis the competition.
When you look back at your career at Eastern, you ever think to yourself you should have gotten into sales or promotion or public relations or training or something?
I'll be honest. I enjoy negotiations. I guess what I enjoy about it, I like to get into a job where there's a finality to it, and hopefully you have a good outcome to it, rather than just planning a process and handing it off to the next guy. I enjoy it's hard, a lot of long hours, but I don't know, I just find it self-rewarding to achieve somewhere, hopefully, pretty much of what you need, not from a personal standpoint, but what the corporation needs. And I just find it rewarding being part of that process, because I find negotiations pretty dynamic and exciting. And I guess what I really enjoy is the mystique. You never know where the hell you're going to wind up until you get there.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, that's the I mean, you know what you have to do, but you may be down this road and one may wind up on that road, and they're over on this road, and you put the best heads together of two groups, and it's amazing what you can come up with if you really want to make it work. And I just find it fascinating, and you just never know. But I don't know, I always get that sense. I always know when I feel we're about ready to reach an agreement, and when you're not ready to reach an agreement. It's almost, it's an intangible, but you have that feeling when something's going to crack and when it's not going to crack.
Sort of an intuitive thing that you...
Yeah, and I found with negotiations, you never let yourself get down or an emotional low or get an emotional high. You got to pretty well run that mid-band, because if you don't, you drive yourself crazy one way or the other. And but I got to tell you, this last round of negotiations was the wildest thing, especially at the end, and watching the MEC and the emotions they were going through wrestling with this proposal we had given them. As I said to somebody, other than maybe the trauma, the excitement of either going to a funeral of somebody very close, or the birth of a child, or what maybe your own wedding, and it's very hard for me to put this in proper perspective, but I've never seen so much emotion or traumatic experience, or people just, you know, completely coming unglued, or in a very close time period as I saw the night of February 23rd. It's something that's very difficult to describe, but it's a night I'll never forget, because it was emotions on one side, frustration by a few, the need to get something done, but yet watching people not having the capacity to get it accomplished because other people were frustrating the process. It was just amazing. The press just inundating the hotel. You couldn't go to the bathroom without having the press following in. The press was unbelievable the last few days down here. They stalked you every bit of the way.
All the way to the men's room.
In the men's room. Yeah, they walked in the men's. Yeah. So it was a very, as they say, wildest scene that I've ever been involved in.
Sort of high drama, really.
Yeah.
I mean, because you basically at that point we're talking about the continued operation or the death or.
Well, yeah, you were going from a thing of you know, fixing it to selling it and then bankrupt. I mean, you know, you were going from one extreme, just extremes that you never thought would exist, and probably without going through that trauma and that emotion that I spoke of on February 23rd, we still might not have an agreement if there hadn't have been that type of catalyst there, because even at that bewitching hour, there were people, I think there were people in that room where the MEC was, that still didn't believe.
Well, when you talk about negotiations, that's one of the things about the whole bluff idea, you know. So, was it a bluff? I suppose it was still in their mind. Was this really happening? Was it a real possibility?
Oh, there was no doubt in my mind it was real. In fact, I don't know how we had gotten as far as we had gotten without the whole place just winding up in Chapter 11. Really amazed, because I felt previously, I thought it was going to occur, but there was no doubt in my mind this was real time, and that if we didn't fix it, we were going to go Chapter 11, because I could see the bookings were off, the cash was draining, the expenses were still way out of sight, and you know, if we'd have gotten into Chapter 11, I seriously question. I'll never know, because we didn't wind up there. But I'll tell you, there's a lot of doubt in my mind whether we would have made it. I think Continental was in some unique circumstance at the time. I think Eastern was today versus where they were when they went into bankruptcy. I think we're a hell of a lot more labor intensive, and I think those factors, we may not have come back even after following Chapter 11. But you never know.
Yeah.
But I sure had my doubt.
You didn't have to find out.
Well, that's true. Thank goodness for that. Yeah.
Did you have somebody that you were number two to for a while to catch on to how to negotiate, and at least how it's done here?
Yeah. Years ago, well, I was in Washington at the time, and I was working in crew scheduling, And my boss, who was the chief pilot in Washington, was Captain Tom Butchin. And he was the chief pilot, and he was a member of the 71 negotiating committee, and frankly the company didn't do very well in that negotiation. And they decided, and had all pilots, management pilots sitting across from company pilots, union pilots, except for one individual. Anyhow, in the 73 negotiations, senior management decided, this is silly. We have people who are experts in certain areas of the agreement. Why are we just sitting in here with pilots? Why don't we put experts in their own field? Why get your brains beat out? So Tom was elected. The company, actually, I think it was either Borman or Floyd Hall asked Tom Butchin to be the chairman of the company's negotiating committee. I was working for Tom in Washington. I helped him out somewhat in the 71 agreement, but from the sidelines, really more of a helping him out on a personal basis than in any official capacity. And I had a background in manpower, from that standpoint, and scheduling and whatever. And he asked me to come on the committee as from a scheduling utilization standpoint, which I did, and that's how I got started. And I did that in '73 and 72, and then I've been on the committee ever since. And as time went on, I just started taking on more and more responsibility. And I was in the 75 agreement, took on a little more responsibility. 77, I was one of two people that really had, by this time, experience on the committee, because we had changed a few members. In the 79 agreement, I wasn't the chairman of the committee, but I was the spokesman. That was the first time. I had spoken previously, but not on a continuing basis.
Right.
In the 79 agreement, I was a spokesman, and then in 1980, I was promoted to director. The first time it was a non-pilot put in the job. They'd always had pilots in the job. And in 1980, then I was the director, and then I was, I had been the spokesman, but then I was the company's chief negotiator, and then I've kept in that role ever since. I got promoted to vice president last May, and but I've kept that position now. I'm in the process of I brought an individual in that did this time during this negotiations what I did back in '72.
Okay.
And I'm trying to bring him along in that role. But I had some real good people. I had a couple of pilots on the committee. I had a good lawyer, a couple of good pilots, strong management pilots. Had a good financial man. As I said, I had this one individual who with a scheduling background, and myself. And I thought we had a real good team. We worked very well together, and we all put in the hours. So I was quite pleased.
Was it hard to overcome the fact that you weren't a pilot, you were the first non-pilot?
Yeah, well, I'd been in flight operations, as I say, around, and the union knew me since '64. But when I made director, there was no question about it. It was this non-pilot, and in 1980 as a director. And there were a number of them who didn't take to it, but I don't think I met not because of me personally, but the fact I was a non-pilot, ground pounder, not sensitive to pilots. And which frankly wasn't true. Probably if any non-pilot, I was sensitive to their needs and what have you, but obviously I had a job to do. Anyhow, that went away pretty rapidly. And during this last round of negotiations, I took some heat. They were not because I was non-pilot, because I was sitting there as a vice president. My boss and I both did. But when it was all said and done, all that heat dissipated. They weren't.
Yeah. It's sort of a part of the moment, right?
Yeah, and actually when it was over, because of what they could have been faced with, had they not had an agreement, I really think they, where they might have had venom for the company and hatred, that really dissipated, and I would say in a 24-hour period.
Hmm.
And because it would have been very easy once, with everything going on, we knew what was going on at the end there with Lorenzo, hell, stand there and say, the hell with you, and not have an agreement and say, you know, go negotiate. If we don't reach an agreement, maybe you'd like to have a continental-style contract. Not that we were pushing that or even desire. I mean, we were really trying to reach an agreement. But they knew that option set out there, and I think the fact that they knew that Frank Lorenzo was going to buy this company, or he was a serious purchaser, obviously that didn't hurt us in negotiations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it brought some realism to their side,
Yeah.
I would imagine.
Well, it's, one alternative versus another
Mm-hmm.
in the future. So.
Okay, I kind of run out of things to ask you about.
All right.
Do you have any things that you felt I missed or that you'd like to get
No.
said?
You know, we basically talked about the history of what is going on with negotiations, and really haven't dwelled. I haven't really talked that much about Bill and what he has done, as I indicated, and maybe I'm prejudiced. I don't think so. I think I'm looking at it objectively, but I think he's done a lot of good in the 3 years that he's been here, working as a consultant. Just in dealing with people and getting people involved who wouldn't otherwise get involved. It's amazing. You get a lot of Monday morning quarterbacks, even in management, but when you get them in a room and say, okay, now if you're in that position, what would you do? Sure, it changes the scene around. I mean, purposefully got a lot of people involved so they couldn't say later, I wouldn't do it this way or I wouldn't do it that way. And I think he made those people that weren't involved in labor relations that, you know, this isn't a little game that we all go out and trade trading cards and eventually we come back with a deck that we like. He got them to realize the seriousness, and also the seriousness if you made a decision and you stuck with that decision, what that could mean to you. So rather than create something willy-nilly, you're really you're playing for keeps here, and this is no child's play. And
That's a good way of putting it.
yeah, and he really brought a lot of people down to earth, and saying, look, when you do this, you're accountable for what you're doing here, and he brought a lot of it's reality to the process, and I think that's probably.
We're back on. You were just kind of finish up.
I just think, not only the realism, but he also brought, I think, realism to negotiations where there might have been some management people who said, look, we need this, this, and this, and let's, you know, boy, this is the absolute minimum. And where he turned around and said, you know, that's all well, we're all in a room here together, but you got to get that side over across the hall to agree to the same thing. So we have to put reality to it. We got to get what we need. You can't settle for less than you need, but you can't stretch the point either. I mean, because the other side has got to feel as though what they're doing is best for their people also. So that, and then I think he worked the union side of the street very well, in that there were people, because, as I indicated to you earlier, you know, things went wrong, management ain't worth a shit. Get rid of that goddamn Borman. Get rid of this guy. Get rid of that guy. Those dumb bastards don't know how to operate. They don't know how to work. They don't know what the hell they're doing. You know, if you had people there who knew what they were doing, they wouldn't even be coming to us. And then take that evolve, rather than being defensive and say you're crazy. Well, look, guys, you know, we can bring this analyst in. We can bring this thing in. at the time, he was able to get the unions, they could have a financial consultant come in and see all of Eastern's books. And what he did, he actually restored credibility because they come in and see the books. Well, yeah. They might argue maybe you shouldn't spend $80 million in advertising, you should only spend 70, but that's subjective.
Yeah.
But the point was he brought order to the process, and he also brought in believability to the process, that the people couldn't turn around and say, you're full of crap, your numbers don't jive, when they saw the numbers. And they saw the numbers during the planning process, and then they saw after the plan was put together on a monthly basis, reviewed the plan.
Has a sobering effect, and he was able to pull that part of it off.
Yeah.
you're saying.
Yeah. So I thought it was, I really thought it was good. So, and as I said, he did a lot more in the interpersonal skills of working with people. And as I said to you before, Jerry, I probably learned more, and I'm not talking about technical skills, but I'm just saying more on dealing with people from just, not from any teachings, but just watching them work, not with unions primarily, but just watching them manipulate management people at a staff meeting, these vice presidents and stuff, just sitting back and watching this. Because even my position before I was even a VP, because I and Roland Pizzaro, at the time were not VPs, we got to come to all the senior staff meetings because we were the guys involved in negotiations, and these guys are making decisions, so they wanted our input. And just watch them, you know, you'd see people tear off on a tangent, and he'd throw a monkey wrench in the table, in the top of the table, and screw it up, and then just watch how people would change positions. It was very, very interesting. And you know, then you get people changing, and then you get them changing back one way, and you do something else, and after a while, what he was creating was the fact is you just on a few facts, you just can't make a decision and run helter-skelter. You gotta do something. You know, you gotta listen. You gotta understand the whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
But and then I think too, he brought some order to the process that we would turn around and based on sets of facts, we'd make decisions and all, rather than really talking it through a lot. He would create people, he would force people to discuss the issue and bring up a lot of the nitty-gritty that might not have come up before.
Okay.
Frank Borman is a very dominant person. As I said, I admire the man. We wouldn't be here today without him. And he's a very dominant personality, and he takes off on a tangent. And there are some people that will not, once he takes off on a tangent, do not want to challenge or throw up something else.
Yeah.
I'm stupid, I'll do it, see? Because it's the way I feel. You know, he didn't, I won't be anybody's yes man. I mean, I'll support the team. If I have my say-so and the decision's made, go this way, I'll do it. I mean, I'm a good soldier, I'll do that. Otherwise, I have no reason being on the team. But I'm not going to sit there and listen to something without offering my 2 cents first. You get people that'll do that. And I think Bill changed a lot of that, forced people to challenge each other more. Not adversarial or to see if you could cut the other guy's legs out, but to do a little more challenging and dialogue before a decision is reached, rather than just hearing somebody say it and everybody put their stamp of approval, and then all of a sudden when something backfires, well, that was his idea.
Okay.
Force ownership into the process.
And the challenging is on the base of ideas, not on
ideas, or if you thought about this, or if you go down this route and this happens, how would we handle this, or do you think? And just those kind of intangibles, you know, where you just put more in force ownership, force people to almost commit to ownership of of the decision, rather than saying, "Huh, it was his decision, it wasn't mine." Because it's very easy for people, to, you know, Frank to come in there and say this, this, and this, and I think we should do this, and everybody stays quiet. He leaves. You know, that's his idea. That's not mine. I mean, you get
Yeah.
people to do that, and I think by stirring the pot, you really get some creative juices flowing, and you'd be surprised. You may not come up with the same answer, anywhere near the same answer, or you came up with a better methodology for accomplishing what you're trying to do than might originally have been suggested.
And you've got commitment to it, too.
Yes.
That's the other part
Yeah.
of it.
So,
Okay.
and I think when people feel like they're part of the process and they're part owner of the process, they're going to support it more than having it saying this is the process. And if they don't, then you can go back and say, hey, wait a minute, you bought in.
Mhm.
What are you doing to me?
Yeah.
So I think he's made the senior management more cohesive.
Okay. On that note, let's quit. Can I get a promise out of you that if there's other things I want to talk about, I can come back and
Sure.
catch you again? Okay.
Sure.
Thanks much, Al. I really
Okay.
appreciate this.